everyone. We are here today at the Missouri Botanical Garden. I'm Christina. I'm here with Cassidy, and we are going to give you a virtual tour of some of the first blooms this spring. A couple weeks ago we were here in the English Woodland Garden, and we were able to find a few little hints of things just peeking out from under the snow. And now we are back in this same spot, and there is quite a bit more to show off. So we're going to start here and take you through some other areas of the garden to see what is starting to show up this spring. So I'll turn this camera around for you. And right next to us here is a Cornelian Cherry. It's a type of dogwood actually, even though it's called a cherry. And you can see it's not quite in full bloom yet, but it's really starting to bud out, and that is looking like it's on the verge of a full bloom in a few days here with all this sun. And with the rain coming up as well, that will be good for the flowers too.
Can we pan up
Yeah.
too? So not quite the spring flowers that everybody typically thinks about, but right above us here is this big maple, this big red maple, and you can see it's also covered in flowers. So just a really nice view here, sort of through the beginning buds, beginning flowers of the Cornelian cherry up into the maples here in the woodland. So lots of flowers, lots of the early spring flowers most people think of are really low to the ground. We're going to see quite a few of those today, but there are flowers up in the trees that are going as well, making all the pollinators very happy.
And here on our left is a witch hazel. It's a great time to come out and see these right now. These are all really at their peak at the moment. This one is a really bright yellow, almost a highlighter neon-y yellow. And down below it here, speaking of those low to the ground flowers, we have these Hellebores in bloom. Here's these white ones, and then right over here a pink variety with that really lovely detail on the insides of the petals there.
Yeah, and these are in the buttercup family, and they're one of those early spring bloomers that kind of lets you know that things are starting to warm up and come out. So a couple weeks ago when we were here, there were barely any buds on these Hellebores, and now we're seeing patches of them in bloom throughout the woodland. So definitely something, if you're here and walking around the woodland, to take a look, because these are anywhere from a few inches to a foot off the ground. And hiding here just underneath this witch hazel that Christina was pointing out. And you can kind of see, well, I don't know how well it shows up on our camera, but even just from this view, you can kind of pick the witch hazels out of the landscape because there's yellow flowers.
You can see some
in
over
a few
here.
different places.
And the garden is open today. As you'll notice, there's some visitors walking around right now as well. Just a reminder that we are open Tuesdays through Sundays every week. And it's really getting up on that time when there's something new in bloom every week, so it's worth coming to visit if you haven't been in a while.
And something, Christina, we haven't even mentioned yet, we're burying the lead here. Starting today, all of the outdoor spaces, with the exception of the children's garden, are open. So because of the pandemic and the city-imposed restrictions, there were certain paths and things outside that have been closed since last year. Those have all been reopened at this point. So there's a lot more of the outdoor spaces to explore. And for the moment, those indoor spaces are still closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but are open Thursday through Sunday. And if we get any updates on that changing, we'll make sure to mention that as well. But yeah, the English Woodland in particular was one place where there may have been some smaller paths that were closed off, and those are all open, and we just ask everybody to watch their social distance as they're walking through, which everybody should be well practiced on at this point.
And up here on the right, we're coming up on some crocuses here. So let me get a little closer and show that to you guys.
Yeah,
Now,
our knees are going to get a workout today, Christina.
Yes. So we've got the purple is kind of the classic color that you think of when you think of spring crocus, but we've got quite a few yellow crocus here as well. Some darker purple, you can see. This is a really nice variety as well.
Actually, I just spotted this, so I didn't notice this earlier when we were walking through, but there's an iris.
Oh, you're right.
Out here in the lawn.
Look at that. That's the first iris I've seen this year for sure.
And there's the second. There are a few these dwarf irises that are coming up in the lawn, in addition to the crocus.
Some more hellebores here on our left. We were just looking at a pink and a kind of white variety. Here's a darker purple one. And more crocus. There's just a lot of crocus popping up everywhere right now. We've been keeping an eye on the Magnolias. Haven't seen any in flower yet, but these buds are here. They've been waiting almost all winter, so I would expect these to not be too much longer.
I think the peak of our Magnolia bloom last year was about mid to late March, so maybe another 2 weeks or so for the Magnolias to really hit their peak.
And here we were just mentioning, this is an outdoor space that has been closed, the Mausoleum Garden, which is now reopened.
We'll take a peek through there in a second, but Christina and I noticed something on our way to start the tour, and it's something that gets me excited every year when I spot it. We have our first Daffodil Bloom. Right here. This is Emperor. It's a type of trumpet daffodil. And this little patch is actually was where I spotted the first Daffodil Bloom last year as well. So most of our our daffodils, with the exception of this one right here, are still waiting to open and bloom. But this little guy is open, and you can see some of his friends here peeking with yellow. And the daffodil collection is so varied here that there are some of these early bloomers, but it's really something. It's a show that will carry on for the next 3 or 4 weeks or so with all the different varieties. And but that's just the first one, that first sort of herald of spring. As Christina was mentioning, this is one of those outdoor spaces that had been closed. As of today is reopened. This is the Mausoleum Garden.
You can see there's quite a bit of snowdrop here, galanthus. And this is throughout this whole garden right now. You can kind of see patches of it as we're walking through. You'll also be able to see that the mausoleum has been restored after some storm damage. The roof is new since this place has been open, and the stained glass has been fixed as well.
Yeah, lots of snowflakes. This garden later in the spring has a sort of white colored bluebell, Spanish bluebell, that will fill in here and take over, dotting the lower, dotting the ground when things warm up a bit. Show you some spots where there's more crocus coming up. This is one of my favorite little patches here on the east side of the Mausoleum Garden, outside of the herring house and the museum building. You can see all that light purple just poking up through the green grass.
And when we were walking through the woodland garden, we were talking about how you can see these little splotches of yellow in the landscape right now. And we're here again in another area with a lot of witch hazel. So again, that's what we're seeing. And you can see there's quite a bit of it in bloom right now. And on sunnier days like this, it's fragrant too. And here's a red witch hazel that you can see back in here. Now this one is still holding on to some of its leaves, so that's the brown that you'll see on there. But a lot of the witch hazel in this area are yellow, but we do have a few varieties that are red, like this one, that are really, really nice. And again, you can see it's just surrounded by crocus here on the ground around it, just coming up all over the garden right now.
And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the witch hazel collection, specifically the witch hazel that's here as part of the Daylily Garden, Christina and I did a tour through this collection about a month ago or so, and so there's some things that have newly bloomed since then, and some things that were in bloom that are now past their peak. A lot of the species that would be blooming right now is Hamamelis vernalis, which is spring blooming witch hazel. Because the vernal equinox is coming up.
It is. Yes, I am looking forward to more sunshine. I think a lot of these plants are as well.
Here's our iris garden. Nothing in bloom here at the moment. That's still about 2 months away from peak. So our irises typically peak around Mother's Day. But we do have those dwarf varieties that we showed off in the lawn a little bit ago. And those are kind of sprinkled throughout other parts of the collection. So you may see some dwarf irises popping up here and there, but nothing here yet in our iris garden. But along the northern edge of it here is another big patch of daffodils, and you can see how close they are to getting ready with that yellow popping through. Again, just that one that we've spotted to this point that's in full bloom, but a lot of others that have really taken to the warm weather, made it through that cold snap a few weeks ago just fine, and they're getting ready. So this is a nice big, you can just see looking out, and that's all daffodils here under the bald cypress on the north edge of our iris garden. So this whole area will be bright yellow in a few weeks.
And again, with the warmth recently and the rain over the next couple days, those are getting really close to blooming.
Nothing here in our lily pools yet. Those are probably about another month and a half away or so before those start getting planted out. That's something we were able to show you last year on our virtual tours. But the water lilies that go out in these pools are tropical, and so we really need to make sure that we're past any danger of frost.
But you can see here, coming up in these beds, I think these are tulips. Yeah, which is a favorite of mine. Again, not in bloom, but just these hints that the big bloom is coming.
And it won't be that long.
No.
Tulips, peak for tulips is about mid-April. And again, that's dependent on the variety. But I've seen tulips in bloom in previous years as early as right now. So it's just a matter of time, and the more warm and sunny days we have, like today, which is just an absolutely beautiful day, and you can tell just by seeing all the people that are in the background of our tour here. A nice day to be out walking the garden. And as we get busier, the garden has been accepting walk-up tickets, but as we start to get into these warmer days, I think it's probably a safe bet, if you want to come and visit, to order your tickets ahead of time online, just to make sure that you secure tickets for a specific day, because we do still have capacity limits with restrictions around COVID. So if you see a nice day on the calendar coming up and you want to make sure you've got you can guarantee that you come to visit here, I'd encourage you to buy those tickets ahead of time online.
We're coming up here on the bulb garden. We've been showing off crocus throughout this whole tour, but here is a really great spot to see crocus because we have quite a few varieties. You can see that the variety name for this is the Cream Beauty, and it is a really, really nice creamy white color. And over here we have more of that yellow. This is a really nice, deep golden yellow.
Yeah, this is Dorothy is the cultivar name.
Here's that purple that we've seen throughout the garden. This one's called Blue Pearl.
And this bed in particular, while we're here, I'll mention is just worth keeping an eye on all spring. So right now there's crocus, there's a few snowdrops, there's a little bit of the winter aconite that's kind of past its peak. But this bed was redone a few years ago and is full of species, tulips, different kinds of lilies and irises, just really highlighting the diversity of those spring bulbs. There's some ornamental onions in here as well. If you are lucky enough to have a 2021 garden calendar and you flip ahead to April, you'll see an image from this bed last year as the main featured image. And I know I personally spent a few hours just at this bed alone documenting all the different kinds of tulips, cultivars and species that came up in just this one area. So right now being highlighted with the crocus, but really once those tulips start to come in, this is a super fascinating place to get a real sense of the diversity with those flowers.
And we'll keep walking along this bed. Speaking of the snowdrops,
and there's a little patch of winter aconite that's still in bloom, so some spots are a little past their peak. A lot of times that can depend on how much sun or shade they're getting or how they reacted to that cold snap. But you can see here, this is still in full bloom in this bed, this little patch of yellow.
And for those of you who might have also tuned in to our most recent tour a couple of weeks ago, this is the first flower that we saw, this winter aconite. But the last time we saw it, we were seeing it under snow during that cold snap a couple weeks ago. So it was one of the first ones that survived the cold, and this patch is still here. And there's only more to come from here. So we're really excited to have seen that first daffodil and see the crocus coming up. And we hope you guys will come and visit us soon. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.